Good morning everybody and welcome to another running video. Today is Tuesday the 9th of June. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm about 3k's into my morning run. I'm going to talk to you about a few things today, and the first of those things is going to be the Launceston Half Marathon and 10k. It's been a running event that's been held in Launceston in Tasmania for the last little while. There is a half marathon, there is a 10k, there's a 5k, and I think there's a 1 mile event for children as well. All of those events seem to run very smoothly and all seem to go very well. I haven't actually run the course, but I am familiar with the course for the half marathon and the 10k, and I've run parts of it in my own running down there, but not run it as the half marathon course. They had a lot of entries for the half marathon and a lot of entries for the 10k. I can't say exactly what the numbers were because I don't know those, but there were a lot of entries. I thought I heard one of the commentators say something like 4,000 entries. For those who don't know, Launceston is the city in the north of Tasmania, and for those outside of Australia, Tasmania is the triangular shaped island at the bottom of the mainland of Australia, and Launceston is the second city of the island of Tasmania. It's in the northeast of the state, and as I say, had these running events there, and they were very popular. There were tables of results published with the names of the people, their position, age group, and bits of other bits of information like that. There were all sorts of social media posts from people who ran the race and photographs and all that sort of stuff. And the one thing I was really pleased to not see, I'm glad I didn't see it, was any list of which shoes did the winners wear. And I'm not saying that shoes are not important, but what I am saying is that at the end of the run, nobody interviewed a shoe. Nobody interviewed a shoe when the first male crossed the line, and no one interviewed a shoe when the first female crossed the line. They interviewed a person, and yes, a person was wearing shoes, but it was the person who'd done all the work and all the training and all the sessions in order to be able to run those events and to be the first male or female across the line. I'm well aware that shoes provide protection for the feet and all that sort of stuff, but the shoes aren't the things that do the running. And I think that sometimes in those lists of which shoes did the first 10 finishes at the Boston Marathon or the New York Marathon, or whichever one it is, which shoes did the top 10 finishers wear, we lose sight of the fact that there's actually people doing the running, and people who put in lots and lots of hours and kilometres of training, and it's them that need to, or they that need to be recognised, not the thing that's on their feet. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was there's a couple of people in England who's runners whose videos I watch sometimes, and the man of the pair was talking about changes that had happened in running in the 20 years or so that he's been running since the turn of the, or 25 years or so that he's been running since the turn of the century. And the first thing he noted was that when he first started running, he used to write down everything in a notebook. So he would record the distance and the time and all the other information he could get like that in a notebook. Nowadays, of course, people use an app on their phone or a smartwatch, Strava or something like that to record all that information. And depending on which watch you have, you get all sorts of information about pace and speed and stride length and idle time and all sorts of stuff like that. So there's multitudes of data. The second thing he talked about was timing mechanisms, and to say that one stage if you just had a watch with a stopwatch complication, then you were doing pretty well. Nowadays you have a multitude of features on your smartwatch, as I just said, that tell you all sorts of things about your performance. And then the third thing he talked about was to do with shoes. And he said that when he first started running, most runners probably had about half a dozen pairs. A couple of training pairs, a racing pair, and a couple of pairs with spikes for track running. About half a dozen pairs, he said. He then said he has 28 pairs of shoes in his rotation at the moment, and that includes half a dozen Chinese brand pairs that he reviewed recently that I talked about. Now, you probably did the same calculation I just did and realised that 28 pairs of shoes, if you wore one pair of shoes every day, and ran every day for 7 days a week, you would take 4 weeks to go through all the pairs of shoes before you got back to the first pair. Hopefully by then the first pair will have recovered. Now, I don't want to say any more about that other than just to say at one stage people were running had half a dozen pairs of shoes. This guy's, and I'm sure he's not alone in doing that, has 28 pairs of shoes. And I suppose there's an argument for saying, well, if you can afford 28 pairs of shoes and you want to buy 28 pairs of shoes, well, why not? The next thing I want to talk about is something that I had not heard about before. It's something called chicking or being chicked. And I didn't know what chicking was until I read this article. I wondered when I saw that mentioned in the article, I was sucked in by the clickbait and clicked the headline and read the article, and I wondered if it was going to be something that was going to tell me about how to run better or, improve my cadence or whatever feature of running I was trying to improve so that I'd be a better runner and record better times or something. And it turns out, no, it's not that at all. Being chicked means that if you are a bloke, if you are a male, and you are beaten over the finish line of a race by a female, you've been chicked. So chicking is when females beat males over the line. So when I first read this article, I thought, no, this can't be something. Somebody's just been paid to write a few hundred words about something to fill up to have something to post on social media. I thought, we are in the 26th year of the 21st century when we think we're enlightened people, we think we're intelligent people, we think we're talking about equality and inclusivity and all those sorts of things. Surely nobody is saying a thing like that in this day and age. But it appears that people are saying it. So I thought a bit more about it, and perhaps that was my problem, that I was overthinking this thing and thinking more about it than I should have done, and maybe I should have just ignored it. But I thought a bit more about it and thought, well, maybe it's just good-natured banter, blokes having a dig at each other after a run where somebody's finished a bit behind where they thought they would, and they've been passed at the finish line or passed somewhere on the course by a woman, and the woman has finished in front of them. So their mates have indulged in a bit of good-natured bantering. And I thought, well, maybe that's it, and maybe it is just harmless like that. But then, again, perhaps overthinking it or thinking too much about it, I thought, hang on, if you even indulge in it as good-natured bantering like that, is that not demeaning and diminishing and denigrating of the performance of women? A woman who lines up for a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, whatever distance it is, has to run the same distance as the bloke. You all get to the start line, and in order to say you ran the 5K, you have to run 5K. The women don't get to run 4.5K, they run 5. The women don't get to run 8Ks and say, well, we're going to call it 10, but you only have to run 8. Or the women don't get to run 16K and say, well, we'll call that a half marathon. They have to run the same distance as the men who are in the same event. And so if you were to say, well, you got chicked, a woman beat you, then you're denigrating and demeaning the efforts of those women. And they've worked just as hard, put in just as much training, spent just as many hours pounding the pavements and building up their kilometres and doing all the other stuff that every other single person that got to the start line of that event had to do, be they male or female, to be able to get to the start line and then get to the finish. So when you enter a running event, the distance doesn't care whether you are male or female, black or white or some other colour, straight, gay or something else, or whatever, it doesn't care. It just says, this is a 10K event, this is the course, this is the entry fee, you do all that, you turn up at the start line and you get a finisher's medal or whatever when you get to the end of the course. And some people are going to get to the end of the course very quickly. Someone's going to run a 10K in 25 or 30 minutes or something like that. Somebody's going to run a 10K in an hour and 20 or an hour and 30 or an hour and 40 or whatever. Someone's going to run a half marathon in just over an hour, and someone's going to run it in 3 hours. But it's still the same half marathon, and it still requires the same amount of energy and effort. The person who's run it in just under the hour or just over the hour has used an enormous amount of energy to be able to maintain that pace all the way through. But the person who's finished in 3 hours has also used an enormous amount of energy to get from the start line to the finish line. And so when we use these terms like, oh, you've been chicked, or you run like a girl, or even girls beat you, or women beat you, or something like that, you are denigrating the women who have put in just as much effort and just as much time and worked just as hard to get to participate in the event, and you're demeaning their efforts. And the one thing we want people to do surely is to be involved in running, whether it's at the elite level or it's just at the park run, and I don't mean that in a just as park run. I mean there are some people who don't do any running other than they turn up on Saturday and they do park run, and they do the park run because they love that and they love the sense of community and so forth. And surely we want people to do that because we know it's good for their physical health, we know it's good for their mental health and so on. One of the things that has made parkrun the success that it is that it is welcoming, that it is inclusive, that it doesn't care whether you're male or female, straight or something else, black, white or something else. Yes, it gives you the first male over the line and it tells you how many females took part and how many males took part and so forth. But it just says, here's the start line, here's the starting time, here's the finish line, go out, do it the way, whatever way you want to do it, whether it's run or walk or a combination of those things, whether it's a gentle stroll with your friends or a flat out run it in 15 minutes. Parkrun doesn't care. And because it does take that attitude of saying, well, just turn up and have a go at it. You see lots of people who are not necessarily keen to be full-time runners or elite runners or obsessed runners, like you might say I am, or other people who do it all the time. It is sufficient for those people to turn up and do that. And surely we want people to do that. We want them to be active. We want them to be involved. We want them to feel like they're welcome. We want them to feel like they're included. And so when you use this, oh, you've been chicked, or you got beaten by a chick or something, you are denigrating the person themselves who's put in their best effort, presumably that day, and just that day, somebody else happened to be a bit better than them. There's always going to, unless you are the front person, or the lead person, there is always going to be somebody in front of you. Unless you are the last person, there's always going to be someone behind you. And in any running event, run your own event, concentrate on doing the best you can do, realise that there is a person in front of you and try to stay as close to them as you possibly can, maybe even pass them if you can, and try to stay in front of the person that's behind you. They're trying to catch you, and by them trying to catch you, maybe they are driving you to up your pace and keep going. So run like a girl, or you're being chicked or whatever. It seems like something of a term that we ought not to use anymore. And if you are one of those people that sort of uses it a bit of good-natured banter, maybe stop and think, what does it mean? What does your daughter, what does your wife, what does your niece, what does your aunt, what does your mother think when she hears you say that and she's maybe taken an hour to do the park run and you've done it in 15 minutes? Just think about that perhaps next time you think about saying you've been chicked. So, next thing to talk about is, following on from that, there's a woman named Elizabeth Clor, spelled C-L-O-R, so I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She frequently posts to social media. She's a runner that lives in Washington in the United States, and she has run 40 marathons, she says. She's run the Boston Marathon 6 times. Recently, she posted, in fact last weekend, she posted that she was taking part in a mini 10K event. It was called a mini 10K event because it was a women's only event, and all the women who were meant to wear mini skirts rather than shorts or leggings or whatever it is that they normally wear. So it was meant to be a bit of fun as well as a serious running event. And it was, as I said, she lives in New York, and the mini 10K was to be conducted in New York. She lives in Washington, and the event was to be conducted in New York. I don't know Washington, I don't know New York, I know nothing about those places at all. I've never been there, but she made a couple of observations. She observed that she thought it was going to be hot, and also that the course was going to be hilly. And so then she posted a picture of the outfit that she was going to wear. There were people who commented about what she had posted, and the first of those was a comment made by a male. And the comment that person made was, well, it's going to be well shaded and it's going to be 75 degrees and the elevation is only 275 feet. Almost as if, and maybe it's the way I read it, but it's almost as if, well, what are you complaining about? It turns out that 75 degrees is about 24 degrees Celsius, and 275 feet turns out to be 83 metres. So I guess over the 10 kilometres, that's 8.3 metres per kilometre. As I said, I don't know Central Park, so I don't know the geography or the topography of Central Park, but she said it was going to be hot and hilly. It may well be that in Washington the weather is a bit different. I don't know how far apart those two places are, but the weather in Goulburn at this time of the year can be very different from the weather in Sydney. And remembering that we're in winter and they're going into their summer now, it may be hotter and more humid in New York than it is in Washington. I don't know. And the elevation, it doesn't sound like a lot, but she may be used to running on a fairly flat areas in and around Washington. As you can see with this run that I've been doing today, most of it have been fairly flat. There have been a few bumps, but I wouldn't call them hills. There have been a few rises, but nevertheless they are a challenge when you've been running for half an hour already and you're coming up on 7 or 8 Ks of your run already. So she finished the race in 46 something or other, and the temperature was between, as I said, 75 and I think about 77 degrees. So that's about 24 to 26 degrees Celsius. And whilst we wouldn't say that was hot, we'd say it was warmish and perhaps not ideal running conditions. You'd like it a bit cooler yourself, but not unbearable, and certainly not terrible in terms of what we can expect in an Australian summer. But the point I'm making here again is that this woman's posting these things to share her enthusiasm for running, to tell you how she went, what she's looking forward to, and maybe to encourage some other people to take part in events like this. When most people post to social media about running or about anything else, they're not putting it there to boast, they're just putting it there, I guess, to share what they've done with their friends and anyone else who's interested. And there's that old thing that maybe your mother said to you at one stage: if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything at all. So if you see a comment, see the post that she's made and you think, maybe she's carrying on a bit about that, just scroll past it, look at it, scroll past it, and move on to the next thing. If you feel like you want to make a comment, try and make a positive comment, encourage her, hope you run well, do your best, hope it's not too hot, whatever it is that you think is appropriate to encouraging her, rather than, and she probably doesn't need your encouragement, maybe it's water off the duck's back for her, but think about other women who are perhaps not so confident, or other men for that matter, who are just taking up running and not so confident about themselves and their performances, and things that you might say that you think are fairly innocuous, innocent comments, but could be taken in a negative way by the person who reads it. And we've heard all about this, the awful power of social media in the past, and I don't want to get into that, but I just wanted to say, let's think about the sorts of things that you say, the sorts of comments that you provide to things that you read in social media posts, especially in regard to the performance of people who are running. You do your best and run your best event. They do their best and are running their best event. Be happy for them. Congratulate them on the effort that they've made and the achievement they've made of entering the event and finishing the event, and I'm sure they'll be happier, and you'll probably feel a bit better about yourself as well. Thank you for watching. We're almost at the end here. If you have a comment, leave it in the appropriate place, and when I become aware of it, I'll respond. Enjoy your running, and I'll catch you when I'm making the next running video, which will be very shortly, I hope. There'll be 2 maps to show you the full extent of my run. See you in the next video.